The engineer's theory. Now, this is something really cool I picked up in university when I studied biomedical engineering for about 5 years. And we learned a lot of cool stuff, how to build mechanical limbs, pacemakers, hearing aids. But there was one discipline when it came to problem solving that I still use today. And the principle behind the engineer's theory is if you've got a big complex problem in front of you, rather than try to tackle it head on, first break it into smaller, more manageable components. So an example as an engineer is if your task was building a bridge, rather than look at the whole bridge and go, holy shit, that's a tough task, you'd break it down into the foundation, so the soil and the earth that you're going to be working with, the superstructure and the substructure, so the stuff that you got to build above the ground and below the ground. So what kind of materials are you going to use to weather the elements, and what kind of stuff below the ground is going to be able to deal with earthquakes and seismic activity. And finally, you'd look at your ancillary systems, so your traffic management systems for the cars that eventually are going to drive over your bridge and stuff like that. So breaking down a complex problem into smaller little problems actually helps you progress and figure out which direction you're going in a lot of the time. And I'm going to show you how I use that for my startup. So the first business I started was called TwoSpace. And we turned restaurants that were closed during the day into a network of co-working and office spaces. And even though we had this idea, my co-founder and I, we didn't know where to start. We were like, great, we've got this amazing idea. We've got this problem that we think we can solve. What do we do now? We were looking at each other like deers in headlights. So because I was an engineer by trade, I used the engineer's theory to at least map out the different moving components and parts to figure out where we should start. So with any new startup idea, a good thing to map out is your key stakeholders, right? And that doesn't just mean your customers, but it could also mean the key strategic partners that you need to bring along on your journey to plug the gaps and solve the problem that you're destined to solve. So when we look at TwoSpace, when we first mapped out our stakeholders, the first obvious one would be our potential customers. So the people who would pay us to use these restaurant co-working spaces. The second would be the venues. So these would be the restaurants or the hotels that we would want to activate and work with. The third, because we're dealing with co-working and office space, was who is going to be our technology or our Wi-Fi partner? Because we can't just rely on the restaurant's Wi-Fi to provide a decent service there. So I'll put Wi-Fi operator in here. I'll put investors in with a question mark because we weren't sure if we needed funding just yet, right? But it's an important question to ask yourselves. We actually bootstrapped in the beginning and we were able to hit our $10 million valuation without investor help. But you never know. At the start, you may need that to get your idea off the ground, depending on what product you're trying to launch. And the final one I'll put in as media, because as a first-time founder, we had zero budget. We didn't even have track record, right? So in order for us to get some awareness around our idea, we were hoping we could build some hype around it. We could communicate the idea in a really sexy way, get some press and get our name out that way and capitalize on that to get our customers. So by mapping these out using the engineer's theory, at least now we've got these smaller, more manageable components that we can go and attack whilst keeping our eye on the big picture, which is our problem statement, trying to turn these restaurants into co-working spaces. And when looking at this list, there's obviously one or two things that we can focus on in the beginning to start getting traction. So for example, the venues are important, the Wi-Fi is important, and media is important. They all trump even our first few customers because we can't get customers if we don't have our test case venue. We don't have our first site, our beta test. And serendipitously, these three moving parts were intertwined in a way we did not expect. And the first moving part that came to the table was the Wi-Fi partner. Because I actually met Nick, who was the head of innovation of Optus at the time, at a startup hackathon. And I told him my story and he said, yeah, you know what? We're happy to be your first pilot. We'll provide the Wi-Fi on the condition you get the venue. And we literally got rejected hundreds and hundreds of times because no one really wanted to be the first. But finally, when we found one that said yes, they said yes on the condition that we'd have a well-known branded partner providing the Wi-Fi, which in this case was Optus. So that was really funny because those two were intertwined. And then because we wanted media, right, to help make a splash, and the journalist we got in touch with said, yeah, we'd love to write a story on you. Just get your first venue, make sure you have a well-known brand as one of your strategic partners, and get your first few customers, right? So by getting the venue, by getting the Wi-Fi, we were able to get the media. And the three of these things all happened concurrently at the same time in this chaotic but also very fateful manner. It was an amazing experience and we were super grateful for it. So by using the engineer's theory, we were able to at least figure out these are the things that we should chase in the beginning because these are the components we needed in order to solve the bigger problem, which was our startup idea of filling these empty restaurants that were closed during the day with people who needed affordable places to work from. So when you have your new startup idea and you're just trying to figure out where to start, use the engineer's theory. Just break it down. Build that metaphorical bridge of yours. So, as always, you've got this. Good luck, and I'll speak to you again soon.